So, how do you get almost 200 countries to agree on anything, let alone one single rulebook for all of humanity? That's the big question we're diving into today. This ambitious and, yeah, often super controversial idea of a global rulebook.
I mean, really think about it for a second. When something huge hits, a pandemic, a global financial meltdown, climate change, these things don't care about our borders. So, who's in charge? Who actually gets to make the final call? That question right there is the absolute heart of what we call global governance.
All right, so where did this whole idea even come from? Well, to understand our modern global rulebook, you have to go back to the end of World War II. The sheer devastation of that war, it left this deep, urgent need to make sure nothing like it could ever happen again. And the big idea, the proposed solution, let's try to write a rulebook for everyone.
And rising from the ashes of 1945, something truly revolutionary happened. Just a few years later, in 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, for the very first time in history, we had the single document that said, hey, every single person on this planet has basic fundamental rights. This was a huge deal, and it was later built on with even more detailed agreements in 1966.
Okay, but what does that really mean, human rights? The core concept is that they're universal. That's the key word. It means it doesn't matter who you are, where you were born, what language you speak, none of that. You have these rights simply because you're a human being. They aren't a gift from a government, which also means no government can take them away. They're inalienable.
And this is where it gets tricky. This is the central conflict, the big tug of war that shapes pretty much every major global debate. On one side, you've got this beautiful idea of universal human rights, one set of rules for everybody. But on the other side, you have this powerful principle of state sovereignty, which basically says every country is the king of its own castle and has the right to govern itself without anyone else interfering. And as you can probably guess, these two ideas, they clash a lot.
So that leads to the million-dollar question, right? What happens when a country, a state, completely ignores those universal rights? What happens when they commit horrible acts against their own people? Does the rest of the world get to step in? I mean, how do you even enforce justice when there are no borders?
Well, in the 1990s, this wasn't a hypothetical question anymore. It became horrifyingly real during the wars in the former Yugoslavia. The world was watching these mass atrocities unfold, and in response, the international community did something that had never been done before. They set up a special court, the ICTY, to go after the individuals who were responsible, even if those individuals were the presidents and generals running the country.
Now, this was a massive, game-changing moment. It set an incredible historical precedent. It was the first time the world said, nope, being a head of state doesn't give you a free pass to commit crimes against humanity. Suddenly, leaders could be held accountable on a global stage. That rulebook we were talking about, it was actually being used.
And this is a big but. Not everyone was or is on board with this idea. In fact, the whole concept of international justice, of putting a country's leaders on trial, it's still one of the most hotly debated topics out there.
Take the International Criminal Court, the ICC. It faces a whole storm of criticism. People say the process is way too slow, that justice gets delayed for years. There are accusations of bias, particularly that it unfairly targets African nations. And then there's the big one. It stomps all over national sovereignty. But maybe its biggest weakness is practical. The ICC has no police force of its own. It completely depends on countries to actually cooperate and make arrests. And here's the kicker. Some of the world's biggest players, the US, China, Russia, they haven't even signed on. They're worried it could be used as a political weapon against them.
Okay, so this fundamental clash, this push and pull between global rules and a country's own interests, it's not just about war and justice. We're seeing the exact same dynamic play out right now with another massive global challenge, the environment.
I mean, think about it. Pollution doesn't stop at a border checkpoint. The climate doesn't care about our maps. These are genuinely global problems. We all live under the same sky, breathing the same air. It's the ultimate shared home, but with nobody officially in charge. So how on earth are we supposed to manage it?
There's a classic idea that explains this perfectly. It's called the tragedy of the commons. Picture a big open field that all the farmers in a village share. Now, every single farmer acting in their own self-interest thinks, hey, I'll just add one more cow to my herd. What's the harm? But when every farmer does that, the field gets overgrazed, the grass dies, and suddenly nobody's cows can eat. Everyone loses. That right there is our planet in a nutshell.
And that's the dilemma.
This forces every country into a really tough spot. It pits what they need right now, jobs, economic growth, against the long-term health of the entire planet. It becomes a massive debate over what the real price of progress actually is.
So, if you're a leader, what do? Do you give the green light to that new factory that's going to create thousands of jobs for your people, even though you know it's going to pollute? Or do you say no and prioritize the environment? Now, imagine that same tough choice being made by leaders all over the world. The stakes just become astronomical.
And we've definitely tried to create a climate rule book. Back in 1997, we had the Kyoto Protocol that was very top-down. It basically pointed at developed countries and said, you must cut your emissions by this much. Fast forward to the Paris Agreement in 2015, and you see a totally different approach. It's bottom-up. Every country gets to set its own goals. It's a much softer approach, and you could say it's a big win for national sovereignty.
But even with this more flexible, everyone sets their own rules system, we still hit a major roadblock, because the whole conversation gets bogged down in this huge argument about what's fair, who's really responsible. It reveals that when it comes to the climate, we're not all playing on a level field.
So here's the heart of the issue. Pretty much everyone agrees there's a problem, but nobody, and I mean nobody, can agree on who should have to sacrifice the most to fix it. Who pays the bill for more than a century of pollution?
Now, if you just look at a snapshot of a recent year, say 2017, the picture looks pretty straightforward. You can see that emerging economies, especially China, are now the biggest emitters by a long shot. But, and this is important, looking at just 1 year's data doesn't give you the full story, not even close.
And this is where the two sides really dig in. On one side, you have the developing world. Their argument is, hang on a second, you guys in Europe and North America spent the last 200 years building your wealthy economies by burning all the fossil fuels you wanted. You have a historical responsibility to fix this. But then, the developed world turns around and points to the current numbers, saying, look, that's history. Right now, countries like China are the biggest emitters. We can't solve this global problem unless everyone acts, and acts now.
And that's really the challenge we're left with, isn't it? Whether we're talking about justice or climate change, it's clear the biggest problems we face demand global solutions. But in a world made up of independent countries, all looking out for their own interests, is it even possible to agree on one single rulebook for all of us? And maybe the most urgent question of all is, can we figure it out before it's too late?